How the fear you avoid is exactly the power you will never control. Every time you avoid fear, you give away power. Think about that for a second. It's not just a motivational line, it's a truth that has probably been shaping your life without you even noticing. Fear is not passive. It doesn't just sit quietly in the corner waiting for you to be brave enough to deal with it. Fear makes deals with you. Silent deals. And every time you run away, every time you look the other way, every time you say not today, maybe tomorrow, you are signing that deal without even realizing it. The deal says, I will leave you alone now, but in exchange, I will own a part of your freedom, a part of your choices, a part of your power. And you accept, without words, without resistance, because avoiding feels easier than confronting. That's why the longer you run, the weaker you feel, not because you don't have strength, but because you keep giving it away. I want you to imagine someone who has spent their entire life avoiding a single fear. Maybe it's the fear of speaking in front of people. Every time the opportunity came up to share an idea, to stand out, to be heard, they froze. They backed away. They told themselves it wasn't worth the stress, that someone else would do it better, that it was safer to stay silent. At first it feels like a small decision, one skipped presentation, one missed chance, but then the years roll by and suddenly that silence has a price. Promotions pass them by. Relationships feel shallow because they never truly reveal themselves. Their identity begins to shrink around the edges because they've become defined by what they refuse to face. Fear didn't just keep them safe from embarrassment, it kept them small. It stole opportunities, influence, and confidence, one decision at a time. And yet the terrifying truth is that the power they always dreamed of, the ability to inspire, to lead, to connect deeply with others, was hidden inside the very fear they avoided. Fear wasn't blocking the door. Fear was the door. Now think about yourself. What fear is quietly stealing your life right now? Don't rush past that question. Don't dismiss it with, oh, I don't have any big fears. Everyone has one. It could be the fear of rejection, so you keep people at a distance. It could be the fear of failure, so you never risk starting. It could be the fear of being judged, so you keep your real voice locked inside. Whatever it is, that fear is not harmless. It is shaping who you are, what you choose, and what you never get to experience. Every time you avoid it, you make it stronger. Every time you run, it grows taller, heavier, more untouchable. And the irony, that fear isn't even trying to crush you. It's trying to show you where the power is. But as long as you avoid it, you'll never touch that power, you'll never control it, and you'll never know what your life could have been if you had stepped into it. This is where most people misunderstand fear. They think it's just there to protect them, to warn them of danger, to keep them alive. And yes, at its core, fear is about survival. But in the modern world, where most of the things we fear are not lions in the jungle but conversations, risks, decisions, and changes, that survival instinct becomes twisted. It keeps us alive, but it doesn't let us live. It tricks us into believing that avoiding is safer than confronting, when in reality every avoided fear makes the cage around us tighter. Safety feels like protection, but it's actually the slowest form of self-destruction. You don't see it right away. You just feel a little more trapped, a little more stuck, a little more powerless each year. Until one day, you wake up and realize you didn't avoid fear. You avoided your own life. That's why we need to flip the script. Instead of seeing fear as an enemy to dodge, you need to start seeing it as a guide. It's not random. It's not meaningless. Fear points directly at the places where your growth, your strength, your future is waiting. It's the compass that tells you exactly where the treasure is buried. But if you keep reading the compass and walking in the opposite direction, you'll spend your whole life circling the desert, thirsty, frustrated, powerless. Fear is the signal. Avoidance is the trap. And power is the prize. So here's the real question. What is that one fear you keep postponing? The one you hope will just disappear on its own? The one you tell yourself is not that important, but deep down you know it's the very thing holding you back? Because until you answer that honestly, until you admit where you've been running, you'll keep playing small. You'll keep trading your freedom for the illusion of comfort. And the most dangerous thing about fear isn't the moment of panic when you face it. It's the lifetime of regret you carry when you don't. Fear is not an obstacle standing in your way. It's a contract you've been signing without realizing it. The terms are simple. Every time you avoid what scares you, you agree to let that fear dictate the limits of your life. You think you're choosing peace, but what you're really choosing is submission. Avoidance feels like relief in the moment, but relief is the most deceptive form of slavery. Because when you walk away from fear, you don't walk away free. You walk away bound. Bound to the same patterns, bound to the same insecurities, bound to the same invisible walls that slowly close in around you. This hidden contract is why so many people live inside an invisible prison. They never see the bars, but they feel them. They feel them every time they want to speak up, but stay quiet. Every time they want to act, but hesitate. Every time they want to change, but convince themselves tomorrow will be a better day. Fear doesn't need chains or locks. It only needs your consent. And your consent is given every time you choose avoidance. The contract doesn't scream, it whispers. It doesn't threaten, it bargains. It promises comfort, it offers safety, it soothes you with the idea that if you just keep your distance, the fear won't harm you. But what it doesn't tell you is that the longer you keep your distance, the more control it takes. Psychology explains this with brutal clarity. The human brain is designed to associate avoidance with relief. The moment you step away from fear, your body rewards you with a sense of calm, a quick hit of safety. Your nervous system learns, avoiding feels good. So the next time fear shows up, the brain tells you to repeat the pattern. Avoid, escape, numb, distract, and you comply, because it feels easier. But here's the trap. With every repetition, you are wiring the fear deeper into your system. You're not reducing it, you're strengthening it. Avoidance is the perfect fertilizer for fear. What you resist persists, and what you avoid expands. This is why years later people feel paralyzed by things that once seemed small. The contract has been signed too many times, and now fear owns the deed to their courage. This contract is not just psychological, it's spiritual. Think about it. What if fear is not there to crush you, but to confront you with the very part of yourself you refuse to own? Carl Jung called this the shadow, the hidden aspects of the self we deny and repress. When you avoid fear, you're not just avoiding an experience, you're avoiding yourself. You're cutting off pieces of your potential and throwing them into the dark. And the more you throw away, the more fragmented you become. You don't feel whole because you've been slicing parts of yourself off every time fear knocked on your door. Avoidance is not self-protection, it's self-rejection. Imagine this. A child is terrified of the dark. They refuse to sleep without the light on, refuse to walk into a shadowy room, refuse to face what they can't see. To them, avoidance feels like safety. But what actually happens? The fear grows. The unknown multiplies. Their world shrinks because the dark exists everywhere. They live smaller and smaller until the fear controls not just their nights but their entire life. Now carry that metaphor into adulthood. You may not be afraid of the literal dark anymore, but maybe you are afraid of rejection, of loss, of failure, of exposure. The pattern is the same. Avoidance shrinks your world. It makes you smaller. It teaches you to live only inside the tiny spaces where you feel safe, while life is happening outside those walls. The truth is that fear doesn't need to win a fight against you. It doesn't have to overpower you, shout louder than you, or destroy you. All it needs is your signature on the contract. And avoidance is your signature. Every time you choose not to face it, you renew the agreement. And each renewal costs you more than you realize. Opportunities missed, relationships weakened, growth denied. The bill comes due in silence, in regret, in the nagging voice inside that says, "You could be more than this if only you stopped running." So here's the revelation. You cannot tear up the contract by ignoring it. You cannot escape it by pretending it doesn't exist. The only way to break free is to stop signing it, to step toward fear instead of away from it. Because the moment you confront it, the moment you call its bluff, the contract loses its power. Fear feeds on avoidance, but it starves on confrontation. And that is where your power begins to return, not in the absence of fear, but in the refusal to keep signing your freedom away. Fear is not just an emotion that shakes your body for a moment and then fades. It is compressed energy, raw potential locked tight inside of you. Every time you feel fear, your body is actually flooding itself with fuel. Your heart beats faster, your breath sharpens, your senses heighten. That is not weakness, that is power waiting to be directed. The tragedy is that most people misinterpret the signal. They mistake the surge of energy as a sign to run, when in truth it is a signal to rise. Fear is like electricity. If you avoid it, it can shock you into paralysis. But if you learn how to handle it, you can light up your entire world. Think about rejection. People spend their lives terrified of hearing the word no. They avoid asking, they avoid risking, they avoid stepping forward. And yet, rejection is only the shadow side of influence. If you fear rejection, what you're actually standing close to is the power to connect, to persuade, to inspire. The same fear that silences you is the exact energy that, if harnessed, would allow your voice to move others. The fear is simply compressed influence waiting to be claimed. Or consider failure. People avoid it at all costs, thinking it will crush them. But failure is only the mirror image of mastery. Every great inventor, every leader, every creator has failed more times than they succeeded. The fear of failure is the signal that mastery is close by, but only for those who are willing to unlock it. Every time you walk away from fear, you are also walking away from the treasure buried beneath it. This is what I call the mirror principle. Whatever you fear most is pointing directly at the power you need most. The fear of abandonment is the mirror of your capacity for deep connection. The fear of criticism is the mirror of your potential for expression and authenticity. The fear of loss is the mirror of your ability to truly value and cherish. Fear is a reflection, not an enemy. It shows you the exact door you need to walk through, but it disguises the entrance with discomfort, hoping to see if you are ready to step into what you claim you want. If you ignore the mirror, you ignore your destiny. If you confront it, you discover that what you thought was an enemy was actually your guide. The science of this is clear too. In psychology, there's a concept called exposure therapy. It works because when people face their fear, instead of avoiding it, the brain begins to rewire itself. The fear shrinks, but the energy remains. You don't lose the intensity, you learn to channel it. The adrenaline that once froze you becomes the adrenaline that fuels you. Athletes know this feeling before a big game. Speakers know it before stepping on stage. Creators know it before releasing their work into the world. The fear never disappears, but it transforms. It becomes a current you can ride instead of a wave that drowns you. History is full of this pattern. Every figure who changed the world had to step into the fear that threatened them most. The ones who avoided it vanished into obscurity, forgotten by time. The ones who embraced it turned that compressed energy into movements, revolutions, legacies. What made them different was not the absence of fear, but their ability to see fear as the birthplace of their strength. They saw the loop. Fear creates energy, energy creates power, power expands life. But only if you complete the loop instead of breaking it with avoidance. So ask yourself right now, what fear has been haunting you not because it wants to break you, but because it wants to give you power? What if the energy you've been running from is the exact energy you've been searching for? What if fear isn't the end of your story but the ignition of it? If you keep running, you'll never find out. If you turn toward it, you might discover that the power you've been waiting for has been waiting for you inside the very thing you've been avoiding. Nietzsche once said that the secret of greatness is not to eliminate struggle, but to embrace it as if it were fate itself. Amor fati, the love of one's fate, is the radical act of looking at fear, pain, and uncertainty, not as curses to escape, but as raw material to be transformed. Imagine the shift this creates. Instead of asking, "Why me?" when fear arises, you begin to ask, "Why not me?" You stop treating fear as an intruder and start seeing it as the invitation to step into the life you're meant to live. The great philosophers understood this because they knew what most people forget. Fear is not random. It appears in the very places your potential is buried, as if life itself is demanding that you evolve or remain small. Carl Jung deepened this idea with his concept of the shadow. He believed that the parts of ourselves we deny, repress, or avoid, the dark, messy, uncomfortable parts, hold the key to our wholeness. Fear is often the guardian of that shadow. When you feel fear, it's usually because you're brushing against the hidden side of your own soul. You may call it fear of judgment, fear of failure, fear of exposure, but underneath, it is fear of meeting yourself in full. Jung taught that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will rule your life and you will call it fate. Fear is the unconscious knocking on your door, and avoidance is the act of pretending you didn't hear it. But every knock ignored is a destiny delayed, and every fear confronted is a step closer to becoming complete. History gives us living proof of this principle. Nelson Mandela, imprisoned for 27 years, could have allowed fear to hollow him out. He could have let the fear of losing freedom consume him until nothing was left but bitterness. But instead he confronted that fear, sat with it, transformed it, and by doing so, discovered a reservoir of power that no prison bars could contain. When he walked free, he wasn't just a man released from a cell. He was a leader forged by fear, refined by shadow, and armed with a power that came only because he had faced the thing most people would have run from. Fear did not destroy him. It carved him into someone who could not be broken. This is the paradox. The people we admire most are not those who lived without fear, but those who walked straight into it. They understood that courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision to move forward while fear walks beside you. Nietzsche and Jung, Mandela and countless others, what ties them together is not luck or privilege, but the willingness to embrace what terrifies most of us. They treated fear as initiation, not punishment. They recognized that destiny only opens to those who are willing to pay the price, and the price is almost always fear. If you want to claim the power that belongs to you, you have to be willing to meet fear as a teacher, not as an enemy. So the question comes back to you: what shadow are you refusing to meet? What fate are you resisting because it feels too heavy, too sharp, too frightening? Until you love your fate, until you step into the shadow, until you see fear as the doorway rather than the wall, you will remain locked out of your own potential. The names of those who embraced fear echo through history. The names of those who avoided it are forgotten. Which story will you write with your life? Avoidance disguises itself as safety, but in truth, it is the most dangerous illusion of all. You tell yourself that by steering clear of what scares you, you're protecting yourself, preserving your peace, staying out of harm's way. But safety, when it becomes your highest aim, transforms into a prison you cannot escape. A bird that never leaves the nest may feel safe from the storm, but it also never learns to fly. And the tragedy is that what looks like protection is really paralysis. You don't avoid danger, you avoid life. Comfort becomes your cage, and slowly, without realizing it, you begin to mistake survival for living. Think about the countless decisions shaped by this illusion. Someone refuses to start a business because failure feels too risky. Another avoids love because heartbreak seems unbearable. Someone else stays silent in the room because speaking up could invite judgment. On the surface, these choices feel smart, even reasonable. Why walk into pain if you can avoid it? But over time, the pattern reveals its true cost. The person who avoids failure never builds mastery. The one who avoids heartbreak never experiences true intimacy. The one who avoids judgment never discovers the power of their authentic voice. Safety pretends to shield you, but what it really does is strip away your destiny piece by piece until all that remains is the shadow of who you could have been. The human nervous system is addicted to this false sense of safety. Avoidance lowers anxiety for a moment, giving you that soothing rush of relief. But what actually happens is that your mind learns to associate staying small with feeling good. And then the cycle repeats. The smaller you stay, the more temporary comfort you receive. Meanwhile, fear doesn't disappear. It grows. It grows stronger every time you retreat, expanding into the spaces you surrendered. This is why people who live their lives chasing safety often end up consumed by more fear, not less. The nest feels protective, but in reality it becomes suffocating. The walls you build to feel safe are the same walls that trap you. The illusion of safety also robs you of time. You convince yourself that waiting until tomorrow is the safer choice. Tomorrow you'll be ready. Tomorrow you'll be stronger. Tomorrow you'll face it. But tomorrow rarely arrives. Days blur into weeks, weeks blur into years. And suddenly you're looking back on a life where the greatest opportunities passed you by because you were too busy waiting for the perfect moment. There is no perfect moment. There is only the present, and every time you trade the present for the hope of future safety, you let fear steal another piece of your story. This is why comfort, though seductive, is deadly. It whispers that you are protecting yourself when really you are protecting your limitations. It tells you that you are staying safe, when in truth, you are staying stuck. And the longer you cling to that illusion, the harder it becomes to break free. You begin to believe the walls are necessary, that life outside them is too dangerous, too uncertain, too overwhelming. But here's the secret. Those walls were never built to keep danger out. They were built to keep your potential in. If you want to live, not just survive, you must be willing to step out of the nest, to risk the storm, to face the fall. Because it is in the very act of leaving safety behind that wings learn their purpose. Fear will always argue for safety, but destiny always demands courage. And until you break the illusion, until you see safety for what it really is, a prison, you will remain locked away from the life you were meant to live. The turning point begins the moment you stop running and decide to transform fear into fuel. Most people wait for fear to vanish before they act, but that day never comes. Fear is not meant to disappear, it is meant to be redirected. It is energy, and energy can be wasted in paralysis or channeled into power. The shift is not about eliminating fear, it is about reclaiming the energy trapped inside it and using it as the force that moves you forward instead of the weight that holds you back. The difference between people who remain stuck and those who rise is not that one group has fear and the other doesn't, but that one group knows how to turn fear into momentum. The first step is to name it. Fear thrives in the shadows of vagueness. When it is undefined, it feels limitless. You just sense a cloud, a pressure, a presence that overwhelms you. But the act of naming breaks the spell. When you say, "I am afraid of rejection," or "I am afraid of failing in front of others," or "I am afraid of being abandoned," you take what was amorphous and give it form. And once it has form, you can work with it. Fear that remains unspoken multiplies. Fear that is named begins to shrink. It no longer feels like a monster lurking in every corner. It becomes a specific challenge you can prepare for and face. The second step is to approach it slowly. Courage is not about reckless leaps, it is about steady steps that retrain the nervous system. If you fear speaking, you don't need to stand on a stage tomorrow, but you can start by sharing your voice in smaller, safer spaces. If you fear failure, you don't need to bet everything on one big move, but you can experiment with small risks that stretch your capacity. Each step is a micro-victory, and those victories compound. They teach your brain that fear does not mean death, that the world does not end when you face it, and that your strength grows with each confrontation. Small exposures accumulate into massive transformations. The third step is to reframe the signal. Most people experience fear as a sign that they are weak, unprepared, or in danger. But what if you began to see fear as evidence that something important is about to happen? That rush of adrenaline is not your body betraying you. It is your body arming you. Your system is literally giving you extra strength, sharper focus, faster reflexes. The trembling you interpret as weakness is actually energy flooding your muscles. The quickened heartbeat you think means panic is actually your body preparing to perform. The moment you see fear as fuel, the very sensations that used to freeze you become the sensations that free you. This is the transformation. Naming, stepping, reframing. Not once, not occasionally, but as a way of living. Every time fear arises, you see it for what it is. Energy knocking at your door, waiting to be directed. You choose to face it in small doses if necessary, and each time you do, the fear loses its grip and the power becomes yours. So pause and ask yourself, what fear could you name right now? What is one small step you could take toward it instead of away from it? And when the familiar sensations rise, sweaty palms, racing heart, shaking voice, will you see them as signs of weakness or as fuel you've just tapped into? The choice is yours, and it is in that choice that transformation begins. Fear will not vanish, but power will awaken. The moment you decide to turn fear into the energy that propels you into the life you've been avoiding. There is always one fear that lingers in the back of your mind, the one you postpone, the one you pretend is not urgent. It might be the conversation you keep avoiding, the project you never start, the truth you never admit. And yet, that single fear holds the key to unlocking everything else. The day you stop running from it is the day you stop living powerless. Most people wait for permission, for a sign, for someone else to make it easier. But no one can face your fear for you. No one can sign your freedom into existence. It begins the moment you decide to step into the very place you swore you would never go. So let me speak to you directly. You already know the fear I'm talking about. It came to your mind the moment I said it. It's the fear you excuse with logic, the one you bury under busyness, the one you disguise as unimportant, but you know better. That fear is the wall between you and the life you are meant to live. And here is the challenge. Write it down. Not later, not tomorrow, now. Because clarity is power, and until you name it, you will keep pretending it's not the thing that is secretly holding you hostage. Once it is on paper, you can no longer hide from it. It stares back at you, daring you to make a move. This is not about me telling you to like or subscribe. This is about you telling yourself the truth. If you've listened this far, it's because something inside you knows you've been avoiding a turning point. This is your line in the sand. You can scroll away, numb yourself with distraction, and return to the same patterns, or you can decide that today is the day you take the first step. Don't think about conquering the entire mountain. Just decide to take one step toward it. And when you do, fear will scream, but power will whisper. If you keep moving, that whisper becomes a roar, and the fear that once controlled you becomes the very energy that carries you. So here's the cinematic challenge. In the comments, name the fear you will face this week. Not someday, not when life feels easier, but this week. The act of declaring it is more than engagement. It is commitment. And when you put it out into the world, you take away its secrecy. You turn private shame into public courage. That's how fear begins to die, not in silence, but in exposure. And every person who dares to write their fear down will remind others that they are not alone, that power is not reserved for the fearless, but for the ones who refuse to keep running. This is your moment to prove to yourself that fear is no longer the one making the rules. You don't need to conquer everything today, but you do need to choose differently today. Choose to stop signing the contract. Choose to stop handing over your power. Choose to step, even trembling, into the very place you've been avoiding. Because courage is not measured by the absence of fear, but by the presence of action in spite of it. And this week, that action is yours to take. Every story we've explored leads to one final revelation, the truth that ties everything together. Fear is not the wall blocking your way. It is the key meant to unlock you. From the beginning, you were taught to see fear as the enemy, as something to avoid, suppress, or fight against. But what if fear was never against you? What if it was always for you, disguised as resistance, testing whether you were willing to claim the strength you say you want? When you see it this way, everything changes. Fear no longer signals the end of the path. It signals the beginning of transformation. Think back to the choices you've made, the roads you've taken, and the moments you've avoided. Every single one of them carried fear as a companion. And in every one of those moments, the power was sitting on the other side of the discomfort. Some doors you walked through and you felt yourself grow. Others you avoided, and you felt yourself shrink. Life has always been whispering the same lesson. Power is not hidden in comfort. It is hidden in the places you are most afraid to step. And every time you step into fear, you step closer to becoming who you were meant to be. So let's strip away the illusions. Fear is not proof of weakness, it is proof of possibility. Fear is not evidence that you're unprepared. It is evidence that something valuable is on the line. Fear is not the signal to retreat. It is the signal to advance. When you begin to see it that way, you realize that you were never powerless. You simply gave your power away by misinterpreting the signal. Fear was the lock, yes, but it was also the key. And the lock it was meant to open was always you. This is where your story can turn. Because from this moment on, you don't have to keep avoiding, pretending, or running. You can choose to walk into the places that scare you most. Not recklessly, but willingly, with the understanding that your fear is not there to destroy you. It is there to deliver you. Every heartbeat that races, every moment of trembling, every wave of panic is not punishment, it is potential. And when you take that potential and channel it into action, you discover the power that was yours all along. So let this be the line that echoes long after this video ends. Fear is not the wall. Fear is the key. And if you dare to use it, you will unlock a life that has been waiting on the other side of everything you've avoided. The question is no longer whether fear will show up. It always will. The question is whether you will keep giving it your power, or finally use it to open the door to who you were meant to become. We've reached the closing chapter, the point where everything we've uncovered demands one final choice from you. Up until now, fear has played the role of a thief in your life. It has stolen moments, opportunities, and versions of yourself that you may never fully recover. But here is the truth. Fear only ever took what you handed it. It never had real power, only the power you surrendered each time you ran. Now you see fear for what it really is, not the monster in the dark, but the mirror reflecting the strength you've refused to claim. The contract is broken the instant you stop signing it. The prison door was never locked, you were just too afraid to push it open. This is not a call to wait for some mythical day when you feel ready. That day will never arrive. Readiness is not a feeling, it is a decision. And it begins with one step, however small, into the very space that makes your stomach tighten and your pulse quicken. That is not weakness. It is the exact energy you need. The same rush you thought was your undoing is the current that will carry you forward if you let it. The question you must ask yourself is this: will you keep letting fear write your story, or will you use it to rewrite everything from this point on? Do not confuse this with inspiration meant only to stir your emotions for a moment. This is an invitation to act. To face the one thing you've been avoiding and prove to yourself that the fear which once controlled you has become the fire that fuels you. Do it today, do it this week, but do not wait, because every delay is another chapter handed over to fear, another line written in a story that is not truly yours. And you deserve more than that. You deserve the life that has been waiting for you beyond the threshold of everything you've avoided.